So today we're going to talk about drug management for program implementation. This is, again, as we do all our talks through this course, this is a basic talk, and because for each topic that we present, we need at least 1 or 2 days, full days, to present and comprehensively information on laboratory and regimen design, etc. So the same for this talk for drug management. This is a very comprehensive topic, and it's very difficult to present in 1 hour, actually in 35-40 minutes. So what I'm going to encourage you is to actually ask questions through my presentation. So I hope that this will actually be much more helpful for you when I go through my presentation, for you to ask questions that actually particularly you are interested in, and so we can have some kind of discussions through my after my presentation. So first of all, I would like to thank 2 people who helped me with this presentation. It's Aziz Jafarov from Global Fund and Maria Sarquella from GDF, who helped with some slides for this presentation. So today I'm going to briefly again discuss these 4 steps or 4 bullet points. First, we'll talk about just general principles on drug or pharmaceutical management cycle. Also, I'm going to mention about GDF and GLC and how they collaborate and what is actually happening when we actually do an international procurement of second-line drugs for MDR-TB programs. Then I'm going to talk about very practical activities, how to calculate second-line drugs for your project, regardless where you're based, on a national level, on a capital of a country, or you're based in very peripheral district level and you only run a small TB facility or TB hospital. You still need to know how to calculate your drugs. And then some information very briefly about drug storage and distribution, and some rules we have around that. So drug management, DM, so what it stands for, and definitions. A couple of definitions exist for drug management, and you have a couple of definitions right here on your screen. I mean, I like the first one better because it's kind of simple and actually explains what we're talking about. We're talking about operations or activities or even science through which drug requirements are quantified, procured, and distributed through all the way from supplier to ultimate user. So in our case, ultimate user is a patient, of course. Or definition number 2, you can see it's a set of practical activities aimed to ensure availability of good quality and safe and effective drugs, and also ensuring appropriate use of medicines and other commodities in health facilities or systems. So we're going to talk about, in this definition, you see notion about good quality and effective medicines, which is also good because we're going to talk about it a little bit in my presentation. So why we have this talk and why every time we're talking about MDR-TB programs or XDR-TB programs or any drug-resistant programs, we're talking about drug management. It's because when we use second-line drugs for our patients, we have some problems and issues getting those drugs. And why it's happening is because, first of all, few quality-assured manufacturers available in the world. What is happening that actually, as you know, and I'm going to mention about quality assurance several times in my talk. So only few actually, and several manufacturers actually approved through different mechanisms. I'm going to mention about them later, and are so-called suppliers of the global drug facility. Not every supplier can be included in this list for several reasons. I'm going to tell you about them later a little bit. That's why we have, for each medication that we provide, for example, injectable, we have only 2 or 3 or 4 available suppliers, which is not enough. And in many countries, for example, in Russia and China and India, they produce a lot of second-line drugs. Those manufacturers are not pre-qualified and not included in that quality assured list. That's why, again, we as a program, people involved in a program of MDR-TB, and when we're talking about drug distribution and actually procurement, we have some problems getting drugs. Then second is drugs are very expensive, as you know, and the cost for MDR-TB patients, the simplest course, simplest drug regimen with the cheapest drugs we can create, I think it's about $1.5 to $2,000 per patient per course. And now when we have patients with XDR-TB, plus, when we have more than 4 drugs patient resistant to, we need very expensive medications such as moxifloxacin, linezolid, etc. And cost for this treatment course is much more expensive. It can be up to $10,000. Also, drugs frequently changed. So because patients have some side effects or patients have poor response to treatment, so we have to change medications. And also, it also affects our drug drug management chain, when we actually planned different drugs for this group of patients, and now we need a new one, right? So how to change this and actually provide medications. So it's a very difficult cycle to a patient who has now new drugs in the regimen. Also, most second-line drugs have a very short shelf life. What does it mean that short? In my view, it's so many drugs actually have about 2 years only a shelf life, but 2 years is only when drugs were started from the moment when drugs were manufactured. It's not from a moment that you get it in your country, but it's when it's manufactured. And it's also going to take sometimes several months, maybe up to 1 year, from the production of the medication until you have it in your drug facility, in your medical facility for patient to take. So when you get drug from through different channels, you already have, about 50% of a shelf life, 1 year. And when we have patient for 2 years for treatment duration, it's very short. Global procurement and availability of drugs is also limited. I mentioned about it depends and actually related to a few quality assured suppliers. Also, registration for second-line drugs is not attractive for manufacturers. Why is happening? It's because, for example, in a country we may have about 500 MDR-TB patients, and supplier needs to come to this country and register his medication in order to for you guys, drug management people, for doctors and nurses, to actually import medication. And registration for a drug in a country may cost many thousands of dollars. So this 500 patients will not will not be enough revenue for manufacturers to get, and he will spend much more money on registration. For big countries like Russia and India, China, it may be helpful, but for again small countries like in Bulgaria, for example, there are about 65 or 100 patients treated a year. This is of course not enough. And when we're talking about, again, these management issues, we're thinking about planning and procurement and estimation. We need to have about at least 6 months for planning, and we cannot act in a few weeks and get a medication. So we need to have very good plan ahead of time. Which is also a big issue. So now I'm going to talk just 1 slide or 2 slides about regulations. In this this cycle, you see when we're talking about actually selection, and then procurement, and then distribution, and then use, this cycle is can be applied to any drug management activities for any medications that you guys use, for second-line drugs, for first-line drugs, etc., for HIV drugs. So it's kind of a general cycle. And right now, here we have on the bottom legally and policy regulation framework, which kind of holds us under control all this cycle. And why we're talking about that is because, first of all, each country has its own drug regulations. It can be done and controlled through Ministry of Health or through different ministries and agencies in the country. But when you guys do implement activities in your country, or when you're trying to expand, and for example, you work in international agencies that you or NGO, you're trying to expand in different countries, you need to know what actually are drug regulations in that country. And it's again, this is just simple sentence I have right now, but in my screen. But however, those regulations may be, I know, a lot of in books you need to read, and in order to see actually what are the regulations for procurement, for pharmacy to sell medications, to what generics can be used, and how to register medication, how to import medications. In some countries, again, you can get a waiver and import second-line drugs without registration in the country. In some countries like Russia, like most Western countries, you need to register each medication in that country first, and then when you register, then you can only import the medication and then use. This is about, again, second sentence I have right here, that many countries, they have their own registration rules to prove safety and efficacy and quality of each manufacturer. Because registration is not just paperwork that we have to go through, but it's also a lot of tests and trials and tests on the quality of medications, etc., behind that registration process, which may take, again, up to 1 year, and again may cost thousands of dollars for a company to register. Let's just go just one slide. I want to just mention about registration before we move to next slide. So procurement of right here on the second line drugs is, again, it's not an easy task. So before we move to that procurement, let's do a short quiz number 1. So quiz number 1, you can use your mouse to actually click on appropriate answers. So which agencies are involved in the procurement of second-line medications? A, GLI, Global Laboratory Initiative; B, GLC, Green Light Committee; C, GDF, Global Drug Facility; D, Stop-TB Partnership; E, WHO; F, IDA, International Dispensary Association; H, all of that above, none of that, or C and F only. So again, it can be different combination, but it's up to you to decide which one is responsible. Okay, so let's see our results. So most people, I think about 29% now, said that it's C and F. This is a correct answer. I'm going to talk about that in my next slides, but many people think that GLC actually and Stop-TB Partnership, not you guys, but many people in the world think that it's involved in the procurement of medications, and they are not. And of course, the Global Laboratory Initiative not involved in these activities at all. So let's move to the next slide and talk about them. So who actually involved in the procurement in this a lot of activities around procurement and supply of second-line drugs in the world, in the international community? First of all, we should talk about GDF, Global Drug Facility. Global Drug Facility based and located actually at the Stop-TB Partnership. Stop-TB Partnership is independent partnership, and it's not part of WHO. It's independent partnership of different organizations. You as a person or your company or your country can also be a partner on that Stop-TB Partnership. And so GDF is actually located at Stop-TB Partnership, the same as GLI, Global Laboratory Initiative, and the same as GLC, Green Light Committee. However, again, this is not WHO. However, what is happening that Secretariat, actually few people who are full-time workers, let's say, or full-time staff of a Stop-TB Partnership, they are located at the WHO in Geneva. But again, kind of legally, let's say it's two different organizations. So GDF, we're going to talk about GDF a little bit. Global Drug Facility was created many years ago to help countries to get sensitive first-line TB medications. However, in 2006, it was a Stop-TB Partnership and MDR-TB working group meeting in Tbilisi, Georgia, where it was decided that GDF should also be involved in supply of second-line drugs, which was actually a good help for all of us. And so now, when we would like to procure medications on international level, we need to work with GDF directly. GDF has several donors who can help GDF to actually support its staff, and also some countries may receive medications for free. For example, Unitate provides money for MDR-TB drugs, and some countries getting those drugs for free through GDF. So, however, the rest of the world, I would say, have to buy medications through GDF. But with, of course, the price is much lower than open price and open market in the Western world. What a procurement cycle on international level, first of all. So first it starts with a country project. Right here, it says most of you guys who are based in a country or based in regional offices. And then when country decided to start or launch an MDR-TB program, or you would like to expand it, for example, or move to a next phase or move to the next year, that's country decision. Also, what is actually happening that many you may get additional funds, for example, from Global Fund. It can be, for example, USAID, any other donors, and those international donors, they require to for you to go through GDF to procure your medications. What they're saying to you that you need to use so-called quality assured medications, quality assured second-line drugs to treat your patients, and so you can use only donors' money only to procure those medications. So, for example, if you have in your own country, you have some manufacturers who produces second-line drugs, but they're not quality assured, they're not part of WHO pre-qualification, you will not be able to use those medications. So you need to go through this cycle. And I'm going to talk about that quality assurance on my next slide. So then, so next step is then for country project to talk to WHO if in your country if you have it, or talk to regional GLC secretariats. So what happened in the past few years? Then before we have one GLC based in Geneva, global. So it was just GLC. It was not even called global GLC, and all countries before they can start treat patients, before they can procure medications, they had to go through the GLC for approval. Then a couple of years ago, this has been changed. So now countries doesn't need to go through approval anymore. But and also GLC is now is located in different regional WHO regional offices. So now it's so-called regional GLCs based in 6 WHO regional offices, and also it's a global GLC. Global GLC helps on a global level. And now countries doesn't need again to go through the approval, but some coordination should be organized with GLC together. And then also regional GLCs, what they do, they also have a pool of technical experts who actually can help a country to develop a program. Sometimes they even may help country to help with a proposal for a donor, and also they can they also come to your country once a year to monitor and provide technical assistance on implementation. But when this discussion been happened, then your requests going to GDF directly, and again, I mentioned GDF based at the Stop-TB partnership. And physically they're located in Geneva in Switzerland. And then, so you have, there are many people, actually portfolio managers working in a GDF who are actually talking to each country. And for example, in your country, you may have somebody who will be appointed for the region or for your country talking to you. So then GDF you will have start discussion with GDF, and you will place in first order of your medications. And then GDF will also help you to get connected with IDA. So IDA is International Dispenser Association, An IDA is actually a procurement agent that actually do procurement of medications from the supplier, from the manufacturer, and then IDA have a big warehouse in Netherlands and then in Amsterdam. And then in Amsterdam, what they do, they get all medications in a big warehouse, and then they pack the shipment for medication for each country. So, for example, if you have your order of 5 different medications, those produced by 5 different manufacturers, of course, and there are several requirements. For example, for Russia, we need to have all medications must be labeled in Russian language. Otherwise, you'll not be able to import those medications in the country. So then IDA in the warehouse, what they do, they actually compile medication from different manufacturer specifically for your country, specifically for your shipment, and then they pack it and they ship it as one shipment to you. Okay, and then you get medication, and then cycle goes again. So again, one slide about quality assurance and why it's important. So what many donors are asking, especially Global Fund, is that for us to only use quality assured medications for MDR-TB programs. And how it can be done. So there are two different steps or two different ways for manufacturer to get quality assurance. First is one way is to get double-check pre-qualification. So a manufacturer needs to apply to a specific, to a special so-called double-check pre-qualification program, and then double-check pre-qualification program, they do different assessments, and they do paperwork assessment, and then they do a site visit, and then they include, after this has been done, then supplier will be included in a list of double-check pre-qualified suppliers, and this will be included given to the GDF. Or second, that manufacturer may be inspected and found acceptable through the stringent national regulatory authorities. So in only few countries, actually, countries like in European Union, in US, Canada, Japan, few maybe other countries, they have, in their country, they have so-called stringent national regulatory authority. And if a manufacturer located in that country, they by default, if they're approved by these authorities in the country, they by default may be included in the GDF. So again, but however, as I mentioned, we have about 3 or 4 medications for each drug right now on a GDF list, but this is not enough. I mean, people may say that it's good. Actually, this is number good, and it's actually increasing, because many years ago it was only 1 or 2 suppliers for each drug. But what's happening that even if you have, for example, several suppliers for kanamycin, none of those suppliers actually registered, for example, in Russia. So if they're not registered in Russia, any Russian program any of them may not import kanamycin at all. So, for example, Russia has problems with importation and use actually of kanamycin through the GDF, because out of several companies registered through the GDF, none of them actually registered in the country. So that's why we're going kind of back to what I was saying about registration in your country. Then again, if you have a list, and you may get this list from GDF, it's available to get a list of pre-qualified manufacturers, approved manufacturers on a GDF list. You can see that there are maybe many manufacturers on that list, and however, then you need to go back to your country and see which of those manufacturers actually registered, if this registration is needed. And then again, this quality control, what is happening that all manufacturers included in the GDF list, and then when this IDA, International Dispenser Association, when they supply medications to your country, they do several tests, and they do inspection, visual inspections. They do tests in the country before they can send you drugs. And also, what they do is, of course, they collect all certificates of analysis for each batch of drugs they do. So you may have a good sense that and kind of feel comfortable that when you get medications from GDF for example, or so GDF slash IDA, those two companies involved in supply of drugs, they will have a good quality. And also, what is happening that GDF constantly monitors the quality of all drugs that are kind of on a list. And sometimes we may hear that, for example, in one country, this specific manufacturer was removed from the list because it was found that some standards was not met, for example. It happened in the past with one manufacturer. So just to summarize, those only two kind of bodies, GDF and IDA, involved in procurement medications, and GLC is not involved in that process at all. GLC, role of GLC is to help countries to move forward, to expand, and GLC provide technical assistance to countries, and they also do monitoring of a performance in that country on annual basis. And also what you can do, you can also, if you need technical assistance, not just for monitoring purposes, but just to help with expansion, or you have some issues in a country or in a region, you may ask regional GLC, you may contact regional GLC for experts, and they can send you an expert. And also another way to also get an expert is to get to contact TB team. So also on a Supplier partnership, you can find a TB team, and the TB team is a tech mechanism to kind of help meet experts and the country, so kind of so they can find each other in that big kind of environment, international environment of TB and MDR-TB. And then TB team can contact experts, or you can go directly contact experts through the TB team website and ask experts to come to your country for training, or for monitoring visit, or for technical assistance. So now we're going to talk about a little bit about quantification. So quantification is a process of estimating or calculating the quantities of specific drugs we need for procurement. On country level, calculation of medicine needs is difficult, actually, for many reasons. And again, because we have many different regimens for patients, especially right now when we have XDR-TB and XDR-TB plus patients, with patients who are resistant to more than 4 drugs, sometimes patients with resistance to 10 drugs. And also because drugs are changing in our environment. We have new drugs coming on the market. We have some drugs not included in the GDF list, etc. So it's kind of and we're going to talk about quantification in a few seconds. And also for the global level, on a global level, for GDF, for example, and Supplier partnership, it's very important to know and to have good calculation, because they use your calculations to forecast requirements, forecast needs of medication, which they can also communicate with the manufacturers. Because some drugs, they need to be at least 12 months in a process to manufacture a medication. So the manufacturer needs to know how much drugs will be needed in 12 months and 24 months from now in order to start production right now. So good forecast is also important, and sometimes we see a shortage of drugs also because a forecast was not done correctly. And again, it starts from a country level, unfortunately. When country miscalculated the drugs, and they need 2,000 more vials, for example, injectable drug. And GDF trying to find those drugs in the international market, and it's difficult to do that kind of ad hoc. So good planning is helpful for both country and project level, and also from the global level. So why we also need to have a good estimation or good calculation? Also, good estimation and good calculation is linked to a budget, of course. So because drugs cost money, if we have a good calculation of drugs, and calculation not just for 1 year, we can do calculation for 2, for 3, for 5 years of how much drugs we need. We can do good budgeting. So NTP, National Tuberculosis Program, on a national level, on a regional level, can forecast and see how much money they need, and they may ask from Ministry of Health, or they may ask from different donors for that. For procurement purposes, so we have good quantities of each drug, actually, not just for one or two, for each drug, for all drugs that we needed for the patient, and so to avoid stockouts, most of all, of course. For GDF, I mentioned, for GDF, it's important to know on a global level to forecast and give this forecast to manufacturers. So now, I would like to spend a few minutes talking about how we actually calculate medications and what we use, what we keep in mind, what numbers and parameters we keep in mind when we do that. So first, when we do calculations, we need to know how many patients we're going to treat. And we're talking about patients in the cohort. And cohort, we use cohort in this analysis we do and estimation we do. Cohort is 1 year. So we need to know how many patients in 1 year we're going to enroll. And then if you're going to do calculations for 5 years, for example, you need to know how many patients for each year we're going to enroll. Then we need to know which drugs we're going to use. So what the regimens going to be prescribed for our patients. It's very simple to use a standardized regimen. For example, when we have, for example, a new MDR-TB case and we have 5 drugs and standard drugs for all of patients, all of our new cases. In this case, of course, it's very easy to calculate. However, many countries, and right now, actually more countries, moving towards individualized treatment regimen, when we have treatment provided based on DST, based on drug susceptibility test. This means that we have 100 patients in our cohort, and we have 15, 20 different drug regimens. Then we need to know quantity of units in a dose of each drug, and this you can get from GDF, because this is GDF will give you information on which quantities and how actually drugs are packed in a package. So you may know, for example, how many vials of caprimycin in a pack. So you need to know that, but it's easy to get from GDF. And also important to know is how quickly we're going to enroll our patients. And this, some people don't think about that at the beginning of the calculations. What I found that in some countries, how they do budget, for example, they budget 300 patients to be treated in year 1. And when I look on a budget, when I look on the calculations, actually that's happening, that all these 300 patients is budgeted to be started on day 1 of treatment, which is not, of course, not true. Treatment enrollment of patients cannot be done in 1 day, right? So, for example, if we have 300 patients a year, and we need to know how many patients a month we're going to enroll, right? So this rate of enrollment is very important to know, because, for example, again, for 300 patients example, you don't need to have all 5 drugs, all 6 drugs for 300 patients in day 1. You need them at last day of the year. For first month, you need only drugs for 25 patients. Why it's important? It's again because I mentioned about shortage of shelf life for medications. If you import all medications on day 1, and you're going to wait until patients enrolled until the end of the year, and some medications may already be expired. So we need to know this rate, and we can then put this on a kind of in a file and prognose each month how many patients we need, and then based on that calculate drugs. Then I mentioned about drug regimen and whether we're going to use DST for drug regimen or not. And then estimation we can do based on regimens if we calculate kind of blocks of regimens. For example, we have new cases with 5 drugs going to be 25% of our patients. 25% going to be on relapse, for example, and patients coming for second MDR-TB treatment, we have different drug regimen. So it's guys up to you how you want to use that. But it's several examples exist. You may do it 25% each group and have 4 different groups. If we have poor estimation of or calculation of drugs, what may happen? Of course, patients will go untreated. We may not enroll patients. What actually happened in several countries that with poor calculations, they planned for actually less drugs than they needed, and what happened that patients was refused to be treated, and they have to wait for a year until new calculations and procurement can be done. Then when we have a shortage of drugs, which happened in many projects actually, when we have not, for example, patient prescribed with 5 drugs, but country has only 3 drugs because 2 drugs were on a shortage or it was stock out for different reasons. So patient get 3 drugs out of 5. So what will happen that amplification may happen for the drugs, and of course patient may die waiting for treatment. If we have too many drugs procured, it's also bad because, again, I mentioned about short shelf life of the drugs, so drugs will be wasted. And actually for people in the field, you will need to actually find a company who can destroy drugs according to your country regulation. And actually it's very expensive to destroy drugs. You need to pay money for that. So now I'm gonna mention about estimation and request tools which we have, but first we're gonna talk. We have quiz number 2. So question is, what parameters do we need to know for the estimation of second-line drugs? First, number of patients treated during each year, duration of treatment, medication prescribed, drug regimen, treatment success rate, daily adherence, all of that above, none of that above. So let's wait for about a few seconds and see. I mean, you can, again, I mentioned you can click on a right answer and then we're gonna see results, but not for each of you, but as a group only. So don't be shy. Okay, so yes, so correct answer is all of that above. I'm going to mention that I mentioned that, but even treatment success rate, even daily adherence is important to know when we do calculations. So let's move to the next slide and talk about that. So there are a couple of examples and tools exists for this calculation of second-line drugs. First one is electronic tools, Excel-based file with some macros embedded in the file, which actually help you to do calculations. You can click on this link and then go on the second-line drugs estimation tool, and you can actually download. It's very light file, not a big one. It's Excel file. What you need to know, you need to actually enable macros in that file in order to be operational. And this tool is very good because then there are several questions for you to answer. For example, again, as I mentioned, how many patients you would like to treat in a year in your annual cohort, what is your enrollment rate, what drugs you want to use, and also they're asking for about cost of the drugs. So in a special sheet in that file, they're asking about how much actually the cost of the drugs, and for each drug you're going to procure. And then where you can get that, again, you should go back to the GDF and contact your portfolio manager at the GDF and ask about price list. It's actually an open document. Maybe it's even available on a GDF website, I'm not sure. And then you can see what is the current price for each drug. And prices actually fluctuate. The prices is not stable. Prices may go up and down. And so you need to make a more precise estimation, you need to put actual current prices. And then there are several parameters embedded in the file. And then when you actually run a tool, so macros actually run the tool, and then you will see how many drugs, each drugs you need each year, each quarter to get. And then also what you're going to see a budget for a number of years that you actually planned for 2, 1, or 5 years, which is also good for you to then budget and talk to your donor or Minister of Health. And also, so this is a tool itself. This is how the first page of the tools looks like. Then you put country-specific information here, and country name actually put here, and then tool presents on the background some country-specific information. But again, a lot of is kind of what you need to enter is you need to enter by hand several parameters here, and then tool will calculate for you as a report kind of form, calculate for you how much drugs you need and for how many years and what is the price for that. Then it's also two different actually ways to calculate drugs by yourself. So if not you're going to use a tool, but do it yourself, or you have a drug management or pharmacists who can do that. First, it's use a consumption-based method. So consumption-based method is the most accurate method of drug projection, because it's based on how much drugs actually your patient in your country used last year. Meaning that, for example, you have 100 patients, in your cohort treated last year for MDR-TB, and you may assume that all patients were treated for an entire year, nobody defaulted, nobody died. So you may assume that all of them got all medication prescribed. However, it's not true. I'm going to show that this is what we have in our report on a consumption-based method done. Not all patients get all drugs every day, and they miss doses, and for many reasons, and I'm going to mention about later. But so if you calculate, if you have this analysis, and you should have this analysis, if you provided treatment already, for example, last year or years before, and you don't have your analysis on the consumption of the drugs for specific cohort, you need to do that. It's actually a very simple way how to calculate it. I'm going to show you in a few seconds on a screen this simple Excel file how it looks like. So you can ask your staff, or you can do yourself and calculate your consumption, and then see how much drugs you need for next year. And second way is for calculation. If you don't have a consumption's historical data, you can do by morbidity. So morbidity method calculates based on your estimation how many patients you are going to have, and your parameters estimations how long patient going to be treated. In your estimations, what is going to be default rate, what's going to be cure rate. So all of these parameters needs to be embedded in this calculation. Why it's important? First of all, we know that patients with MDR-TB treated for 24 months on average, right? However, we know that not everyone will finish successfully, unfortunately, right? Somebody will die, somebody will default, somebody will fail. So we need to know our future, let's say, success rate, what we're aiming for, or if we know historical data, or we know data from the region, for example, or from neighboring countries, we can use that and calculate and put this parameter right here. I have it 30-35% finish treatment earlier. This is one of the parameters that we use for our calculations. What does it mean? That actually using this parameter only, we will be reduced by 30%. We will reduce our estimation for drugs. What is also important, we're going to reduce by this percentage also a budget for second-line drugs, right? So meaning that we can actually, for the money we have, we can treat more patients because we actually saved 35%. If you're not going to use this parameter and we're going to calculate that, let's say 100% of our patients gonna finish successfully, again, what we find ourselves that we have more drugs in the drug stock that we can use, and then more drugs will actually lead to expiration, and we have to actually destroy drugs. Also, the second parameter is important to know is percentage of drug prescribed. The easiest example for this, when we're talking about that, it's kanamycin versus capromycin. We know that we have each patient with MDR-TB should get injectable drug. But which percentage, how many patients should get capromycin, how much should get kanamycin, right? So this percentage, again, you can do your own analysis and just do this calculations based on analysis in your country, or you can use it based on your historical data. And then the last one is also important: daily adherence. What is this parameter tells us? All patients who are not defaulting and not dead, but patients who are on treatment daily, right? They are our patients that we provide treatment on daily basis. and they not defaulted. They're not registered as a default. All those patients can kind of register it, and actually on our list, they're not getting drugs every day. They miss drugs on, they may miss 1 dose a day, they may miss 1 dose a week or 1 dose a month, but they're not adherent 100%. We should know that. So let's say on this file, I have it for you. This is a busy slide. I'm going to explain how it's done, and you can do the same for your country. So this is this first block here on top. I'm just using my arrow here as a green one. Shows your consumption, actually for Tomsk region, consumptions of second-line drugs. So this is May 2005. You see how many patients, 303 patients was enrolled for treatment. So this different colors talks about different medications. So the yellow one is the coprimycin. The coprimycin is the easiest one because we use only 1 injection a day, right, prescribed for our patients. So coprimycin, we have 47% of patients on the coprimycin. So in terms of number, 133 patients on coprimycin. And now, so we see that for May 2005, it was 2,770 vials of coprimycin was used. Okay, and then when we calculate how much vials were used, when we divide, how much vials were used, how much coprimycin was used, and we divide over the number of patients, we see that only 19 vials per patient were used on average. And we provide, in Tomsk, we provide medication 6 times a week. So patients should get 24, 25 injections a month, right? So we see only 19 on average, 19 vials were used. Again, this is adherence. For this month, adherence was less than 100%. Then for June, it's 13%. For July, it was 13 vials, 10 injections. For July, it's less, even 10, because it was shortage of coprimycin. See, now it's 0. People was actually moved to clindamycin. So now, if you do this analysis, again, for this one, you don't need to have a patient data like a patient's charts. What you need to know only how many patients you have on this specific drug and how much drugs were used. You can do that by pharmacy analysis, by analysis of your pharmacy, of your warehouse. So what we have then, to be more precise, we use 12 months data here, and then on average 16 doses of coprimycin we need for 1 patient a month. And this number we use for projection. So now this second half of the table, this is a projection, how we calculate our future drugs, future drug orders. This is a projection for future months. This is how many patients we actually project to be on coprimycin. This is how many patients we're going to have in total in a cohort. You see it's a big number, 500 here on treatment, a lot of patients. 211 of them going to be on coprimycin, and this is how many vials we need for a month, 3,413, based on this 16 consumption. Okay, this is a so-called consumption method. Again, it's very easy to use, and much more precise for calculations. So now let's move to a distribution. I'm going to have only a few slides about distribution. This part, what we need to know about distribution. So goal of this distribution is to have all stocks, so meaning drugs and other supplies, available in healthcare facilities when needed by the patient to avoid treatment interruption. And distribution is also a challenge for many reasons. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but again, it's lack of skills of pharmacists or medical staff or managers, inappropriate management system in the country, problem with the pipeline, problem with the transportation, waste and theft also happening, so poor security and poor inventory control. What is this table? I like this table because actually summarized what are actually storage condition and also transportation condition for each medication. And again, you can just have this, and you're going to have a PowerPoint slide when we finish the talk. You can see what actually storage conditions for some medications. You see that most of them should be kept in a temperature range not more than 25 degrees Celsius, ideally not more than 15, and of course should be low humidity, should be no direct sunlight, and for some medications like a Pazzer, for example, in a sachet, is a cold chain should be used, for example, because temperature should not be more than +5. This drug should not be frozen, but should be kept in very low temperature. Why it's important? It's important, again, for every storage that we have. It may be on a national level, we have a big warehouse. It may be a small warehouse in your facility, in your hospital. Every time, in every place when we keep our drugs, we should have this temperature and humidity control and direct sunlight control. Very important. And also, I just want to tell you about this this graph. It just visually shows you what's happening with the drug. So this is a drug stock you have, and as you treat patients, drugs going down, right, in terms of number. And so on some level, we have a threshold where a new order should be placed. Okay, so we place new order, and then we wait for this order to come, and we again continue treatment, and then we have new order received. We have a full stock right here, and then you go again. This threshold is very important when we should not go beyond, because this is a safety stock, okay, between these two lines. And this is the last one, is a stock out. So we should never our stock should never reach this line, because you're going to have a stock out right here as a projection you see. Should never happen. So what is actually this time frame as a safety stock? I would say at least 3 months. So people may say 3 to 6 months or even 6 months to be on the safe side. So again, but minimum, you should have a good stock for 3 months in your pharmacy, regardless of location. It should be national or peripheral level or district level. You should have at least 3 months of safety stock. And now this is a kind of a report from one facility in Tomsk. So you can see just one line, coprimycin here, and we have how many patients were on coprimycin daily, 143. Then by estimation, how many vials of coprimycin should be used per month, 3,700. This is actual usage, 2,770, 75%. This is kind of, I mentioned about this kind of a coefficient parameter adherence rate. And then this is actually a drug stock in this pharmacy. How much coprimycin exists? 4,842. Okay, so when we divide this number over the monthly usage of medication, we see that this drug will be used in 34 days. So this is actually not good. Example of not good storage, not good stock, because we have at least 3 months of stock for this medication. For ofloxacin, we see it's 288 days, which is very good. And then the last column tells about expiration date. We also need to know for each batch of drugs, we need to know expiration date and to monitor that. So we have last quiz. Let's do that before we finish talk. So last quiz. In country A, 570 MDR-TB patients are on treatment with second-line drugs. As of January 2013, the drug stock of coprimycin was 8 months. Question: when should the next order of drugs to GDF should be placed? Okay, so option is in 2 months from now, from January 1st, like on March 1st, for example, 2013. In 5 months, on June 1st, 2013, should be already been placed in December 1st, 2012, or should be placed 12 months before stock out. So let's yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. Let's broadcast result, and I'm going to comment right now. So this is a very actually tricky question, and I don't have a correct answer specifically for this question, because we don't know what is the lead time for between our procurement of drugs before we place an order and when the order will be supplied to your country. I mentioned about stock out, about safety stock should be about 3 to 6 months, which is I mean it's good to have. However, time for you to actually from lead time between your procurement, before you actually send the first email to GDF and asking about procurement of medications, and then when you get medication in the country cleared through the customs and actually in your warehouse, it may take several months. What we kind of actually advise to plan about at least 6 and 9 months. Okay, so if you have 9 months of lead time plus we have 3 months of stock, then we should have actually place in our order 12 months before the stock out. Okay, so this kind of was for us to know that, very important to know that lead time, let's move to the next slide. Lead time is can be many months. And then also the last one is we also should monitor drug usage and how drugs are used, and actually workforce of pharmacists or drug managers to see how drugs are used. And again, what I mentioned about consumption-based method for calculation, when we do this calculations and do analysis of drug use, and we have these reports, it's easy for us to see how much drugs we use, and then we can also see how much drugs we need to order for next procurement. So now let's quickly move to our questions. We have several questions. First one, if the GLC no longer approves the second-line drugs, then what's the specific role in the procurement cycle? Can't countries go directly to GDF? Yes, so I mentioned that GLC actually never before been involved in procurement directly. They were kind of given approval for the countries to procure drugs or not. And they may go, for example, before it was country A, they had 100 patients estimated a year, and they will ask GLC for approval, and GLC may give them 20 patients for approval, because they will say, okay, guys, you're doing a pilot, and we need to learn, and then we have 20 patients for approval. And then only those 20 patients will be kind of covered through the procurement. Now GLC no longer doing these approvals, and so they're not involved in the procurement at all. But what is happening, GLC is doing in regional GLCs, they're just doing coordination. They just need to know how many patients you have, just to know how many patients you guys doing and how quickly you kind of enrolling all your patients, and what is the difference between your enrollment, planned enrollment, and actually estimation of patients in your country or detected patients, just to help you just to push you a little bit forward with your expansion. That's the role of regional GLC now, and also they send you a technical consultant if you need that. And yes, you can go directly to GDF if you need to. Is it mandatory for manufacturers to post marketing drug surveillance studies? For manufacturers, no. It's not mandatory for them. For manufacturers, what is mandatory for them is if they would like to be part of the GDF, going to be on the GDF list, they need to be pre-approved, WHO pre-approved, or so this WHO pre-qualification mechanism, or they need to be approved by the stringent regulatory authority in their countries. And then for specific countries, inside of the countries, they need to get through registration of specific drug. For example, again, I mentioned Russia, for example, that in Russia it's a very strict regulation. Each manufacturer should be registered before they can drugs can be used actually by patients. Why do we use 12 months cohort of treatment takes at least 18 months? That's a very good question. So enrollment cohort and a treatment duration is two different parameters. It's very important. So when we do calculations, and because calculations actually going to lead to eventually going to lead to a budget, right? We're going to see how much money we need for each year, and budget are also done on an annual basis. For calculations for enrollment cohort, we use 12 months, meaning that how many patients you're going to enroll for during this year, during year 1 or year 2, year 3 of your project. But then for treatment duration, there's a different parameter, and then you can use whatever treatment duration you prefer. You can put 24 months or 18 months for each, and this is going to tell you how much drugs you need for each patient over the 2 years. But again, it's a little bit two different parameters. But both of them is important. What is a bottleneck in the procurement process? It seems like a long time. In other words, is there a way to help expedite the process? The bottleneck, I explained to you that, again, it's few manufacturers exist, and there are kind of actually a waiting line. So that's why we have 6 to 9 months, or even sometimes 12 months between the order and between we get a drug in a country. Also, sometimes drugs may be waiting in the customs of your country. Sometimes customs procedures, customs clearance may take months or 2 months. So how you can expedite? You can expedite with a good planning ahead of time. If you plan 1 year ahead, 2 year ahead, and you plan, you coordinate your activities with an appropriate GDF officer as a SOP-TB partnership. You talk to them and you ask about, what is expected lead time for my drugs for my country, and they know that they're very experienced people, and that's the only way you can expedite the process, unfortunately. Also, you can maybe, if you have any contacts or in a country, you can maybe ask them to, among suppliers of manufacturers, you can ask if those suppliers can also go to WHO for pre-qualification. In this case, entire world will globally will benefit from this process if more suppliers will be involved in that GLC GDF pre-qualification process. What is the best way to estimate the duration of the injectable for ordering purposes? Again, a good question. So best way to estimate is based on consumption method. So you can look in your country for your patients, or maybe not your own patients, but patients in a country, how many months they were getting injectables, and on average, of course, let's say 100 patients last year, all of them, of course, were on injectable drug. How many months on average they were staying on injectable, or what is consumption for each month, and then you kind of use this consumption, monthly consumption, and see over the year how many vials of coprimycin or kanamycin were used for this cohort of patients. That's the best way to calculate. The second way is, again, use WHO tool for calculation and see what is estimation there. But for my own experience, even we prescribe injectable for 8-9 months in Russia, in our programs in Russia. What we see actually by consumption methods, that injectable continues only for about 5 months on average for patients. Shall we use 30-35% finished treatment earlier and the daily adherence in consumption-based method? This is parameters that we use in morbidity-based method, meaning that if you don't have your consumption data, if you don't know in your country what was historically, how much drugs were consumed by your patients, if you don't know that, you can use number of parameters that I mentioned. Again, I mentioned just few parameters. There are many, about 7, 8 parameters that we use. Again, as earlier was question asked about 18 months. Again, one of them is duration of treatment, for example, one of the parameters. So again, if you don't have consumption-based method, if you don't know your historical data for your own region or country or district, you need to use WHO tools, for example, as a start point for you to calculate your drugs. And there are several parameters already kind of embedded in that file. If you have a consumption-based, or you can get data, I would advise you to get your own country data for a consumption-based method. When the country is scaling up case detection, how do we estimate when to order? Again, very good question. For that, we need to kind of have 2 steps to be accomplished. First, we need to do a projection of how many patients are going to be detected in the country. Because you're doing case detection right now, so you rely on some activities, like, for example, you do active case finding, or you have a gene expert machine in your country, or you're planning to have more, and you know how many tests gene expert machine can do, for example, right? And then you can also estimate how many patients are going to go through, or tests are going to go through each machine, and you know approximately what is the percentage of primary resistance for your patients, and if you planning to treat all of them with second-line drugs, for example. So you should do careful projection of your of number of patients you would like to you expect, let's say, to detect. That's number one. And then when you have this number for at least next 5 years, you can change this number, of course, every year. You can modify your analysis, but every time when you do that, you plan for several years ahead of time. Then you do second step, you do your consumption-based method for calculation of drugs to estimate, and then you do your order. And if you have actually more patient enrolled as you compared to what you planned. For example, you planned for 70 patients to be treated a quarter, enrolled in each quarter, but you have 100 patients and you do have money to treat more. What you actually do, you recalculate your needs, and you do kind of new request to GDF, because of course you have some stocks of your drugs. You can see, can those 100 patients actually eat drugs of which you actually planned for 70 patients, 75 patients, and before your new order will be shipped to you. If you can do that, of course you can just scale up and put new order. And again, it's no limitation how many orders you can do a year. You can do an order once a month. You can do order once a quarter, once a 6 months. To GDF, it's no limitation. It's up to you how often you want to do that. Usually, I mean, what is recommended to do at least every 6 months to do analysis, careful analysis of your stocks and the consumption, and every 6 months do assessment and then do new drug order. So I think we a little bit over time, and so I'm thank you very much for your participation, and I'm gonna